Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. Wang Qiu's pretty face seemed like it was covered with a layer of frost. Do I look like someone who doesn't finish what I start? She grabbed Hu Yuhao's left hand authoritatively as she spoke, and the two of them initiated their martial soul fusion. Hu Yuhao heaved a sigh. He wasn't willing to receive too much help from her so that he could prevent their feelings from developing. However, he was still relieved when Wang Qiu did catch up with him. His exploration attempt would be a lot more relaxed than before with her around, and he would also be a lot safer than otherwise. His soul protective barrier enveloped Wang Qiu within it, so she stopped releasing her golden flames to defend herself, and the two of them landed on the ground as if they had been together the whole time. They were back in that rainbow-colored world, but they were a lot more familiar with their surroundings from their previous experience. Hu Yuhao pulled Wang Qiu along the moment they landed and ran towards the edge of the ravine where the jade phosphorus flower of the 7 absolutes was growing. Why aren't you breaking through the middle? Have you forgotten its location? Wang Qiu asked confusedly. Hu Yuhao said, you said it before. I don't know what unforeseen dangers I may face over there, so I can't just break through the middle. It will be too late if I run into any contingencies, and I have to deal with them on the spot. Furthermore, I also want to test the extent to which these jade phosphorus flowers are afraid of the cold. Wang Qiu glanced at him coldly, and that noble and aloof feeling made Hu Yuhao feel as if he was being looked down on. I thought you weren't afraid of dying. Why don't you just throw your life in and get it over with? So, you're afraid of dying after all. I guess I overestimated you before. Hu Yuhao snapped, why would we want to die if we can live? That's enough, let's not bicker. We are consuming soul power. Take the milk bottle, and I'll have a go. Hu Yuhao gave a milk bottle to Wang Qiu, just in case she needed it, and the two of them stopped about 30 meters away from the jade phosphorus flowers. Hu Yuhao opened the water bottle and poured out the water from inside. The water that was poured out was immediately frozen in midair by his ultimate ice soul power, and a large sphere of ice quickly appeared before him. Wang Qiu looked on as Hu Yuhao did all this, a strange feeling surfacing in her heart. This guy seems to trust me a lot. I'm pressing against a vital point on his back. If I channel my soul power, I can break his nerves and end his life. He's not afraid of that. HMPH, why should I even kill him? Killing him will dirty my hands, Wang Qiu thought to herself arrogantly. The sphere of ice was roughly a foot in diameter. Hu Yuhao's left hand was holding it up, and gradually turned icy blue, while the temperature within his protective barrier began to plummet. Hu Yuhao shook his wrist, and the enormous ball of ice flew out as it spun through the air. Hu Yuhao was a disciple of the Tang sect, and he had great control over his fingers and wrists. He was using one of the Tang sect's hidden weapon techniques, as he hurled the ball of ice, which emanated an icy blue radiance as it flew straight out. The multicolored miasma was extremely powerful, and immediately seemed like it was about to attach itself to the sphere of ice once it appeared. However, this sphere of ice contained Hu Yuhao's ultimate ice, so how could the miasma attach itself to it so easily? The multicolored particles were blown in all directions wherever this sphere of extreme chill went, and it was clear that the toxic miasma was severely affected after the water vapor inside was frozen. The sphere pierced through the multicolored miasma, and it finally arrived at the bluish-green jade phosphorus poison clouds. Just as Hu Yuhao and Wang Qiu had speculated before, these poison clouds were controlled by those flowers that had evolved into the jade phosphorus flower of the 9 absolutes, which were plant-type soul beasts. Large patches of poison clouds were stirred up once this sphere of ice plunged into them, and the bluish-green mist poured forward. However, every kind of poison mist or gas had a unique characteristic. They definitely contained some water within them. Pure smoke or mist dissipated extremely quickly, and there was no way it could drift through the air for a prolonged period of time, and it would be blown away by the wind. Once the poison clouds approached the sphere of ice, Hu Yuhao could see that the poison mist was pouring forward into the chill from his ultimate ice, while it produced large volumes of bluish-green particles that drifted in all directions. The area that the poison clouds covered would then increase for an instant, but then quickly thin. Hu Yuhao's experiment clearly wasn't as simple as tossing the sphere through the clouds, and he raised his left hand as he clenched it tightly. Boom! The ball of ice immediately exploded, and the ice explosion that Hu Yuhao had infused into it unleashed its full force. A violent explosive force immediately caused the sphere to dissipate into countless ice particles that flew in all directions, while the shockwaves swept towards the jade phosphorus flowers around them. Hu Yuhao was already using his spiritual detection to meticulously observe how the flowers reacted. The Snow Lady gave him an affirmative answer before she flew out of the protective barrier. Hu Yuhao was just feeling a little worried as the orange-gold light on her body began to sparkle. Intense chills billowed from her body as the humid miasma in the air began to transform subtly. Large patches of multicolored miasma swiftly began to dissipate, as if they had encountered something terrifying, and uncountable multicolored particles drifted to the ground while the air around them cleared up. Both Hu Yuhao and Wang Chua were stunned on the spot. The toxic clouds that they had so feared were like nothing before the little Snow Lady. What was going on? Idiot! Ultimate ice is the best counter to all the toxins in the world. Didn't you know that? Useless. Skydream's lazy voice appeared in Hu Yuhao's mind. Where would I ever know that from? The corner of Hu Yuhao's mouth twitched as he spoke in his mind. Why didn't you tell me earlier, brother Skydream? I just woke up. The Snow Lady turned around in midair and flew back, while the orange-gold light radiating from her body wrapped back around to envelop Hu Yuhao and Wang Chua inside. The poisonous clouds around them were instantly dispelled, and there wasn't much left to threaten them at all. Hu Yuhao turned towards Wang Chua as he forced a laugh and said, "It seems like ultimate ice can counter acute poison after all." Wang Chua frowned and said, "Seems like it. If that's the case, then ultimate fire can probably counter toxins as well." Hu Yuhao said, "Let's not talk about all that. Let's take a look and see if we can venture deeper into the valley." They began to walk toward the jade phosphorus flowers, while the Snow Lady protected them. The intense chill from the Snow Lady's body was a lot stronger than the sphere of ice from before, and both the multicolored miasma and the jade phosphorus poison clouds had no way of fending her off. The flowers closed up one by one as the extreme chill assaulted them, while the surrounding poison clouds dissipated continuously, and could no longer threaten the two of them. Ultimate ice can beat all toxins. How did I not know that? It's no wonder Uncle Niu Qian wasn't worried about sending me here at all. Hu Yuhao's confidence was greatly boosted with this discovery. He lowered his voice and growled, "Let's go." Hu Yuhao grabbed Wang Chua's hand as they soared into the sky. The jade phosphorus flowers were extremely poisonous, and were naturally untouchable, but they had their flying-type soul tools. The little Snow Lady landed on Hu Yuhao, and the orange-gold light that she released became their best defense. Watch out. Hu Yuhao growled. Hovering in midair at this moment was undoubtedly the most dangerous thing they could do. Hu Yuhao didn't dare to conserve soul power, as he swung his right hand out, and instantly slashed through the dense mist with his dark golden terror claw. His right hand slashed through the air with lightning speed, using the complete version of his dark golden terror claw. The Snow Lady and Hu Yuhao's mind were connected, and that meant they had exceptional chemistry with one another. She blew in the direction of the attack, and cold energy burst ahead of them. Large patches of poison clouds dissipated and cleared up their vision. It was a dark blue vine dotted with rainbow-colored patterns. It was as thick as a human thigh, and whipped towards them like an enormous python. However, the dark golden terror claw was the dark golden terror claw bear's signature move, and Hu Yuhao gave everything he had with this strike. A dark golden streak of light flashed by, and the thick vine was immediately cut into a million pieces, as it drifted away in the wind. Hu Yuhao raised his voice and reminded Wang Chua, "It's clear that there are precious and exotic things here that are extremely beneficial for plant growth. This should a place inhabited by many plant-type soul beasts, and they are extremely powerful. Be careful." Several other thick vines swept towards them at this moment. The rainbow colors on these vines were clearly caused by the toxic miasma, and the fact that they were completely fine meant they probably contained acute venom as well. "You control our descent. Let me try." Wang Chua shouted as she thrust her golden dragon spear forward while she grabbed the other end of it, so that her golden dragon spear could reach the maximum area of effect. She was the golden dragon after all, and she was always dominant and fearsome. Perhaps she had been stifled for too long, after dealing with the poison clouds for 2 days, or perhaps this was a cathartic release of her fury towards Hu Yuhao, but her strike was exceptionally ferocious. She was using her golden dragon spear like a flail. A thick blue vine whipped towards her, and Wang Chua swung her golden dragon spear towards it like a lightning bolt. A boom could be heard as she smashed the vine into the distance. Vines were typically quite flexible and elastic, and the front parts would still whip forward even if the vine itself was struck. The multicolored miasma, the jade phosphorus flowers of the seven absolutes, the jade phosphorus poison clouds, and the venomous vines growing from the valley's walls, every single entity could have been fatal. This place was protected by so many fatal poisons, so what kind of sinister place was this? But, what was before Hu Yuhao and Wang Chua now far exceeded their expectations. They had pierced through the multicolored poison clouds, and what they breathed in was an unprecedented fresh air full of life energy. The place they were looking at wasn't sinister at all, it felt like heaven on earth. The air was completely covered by the rainbow-colored clouds, and the rainbow colors shone and reflected over the valley, making it appear extremely enchanting. The valley walls in the distance were full of the dark blue vines that had ambushed them just now, and the entire wall looked like it was made from sapphires that flickered with a faint rainbow-colored luster. The valley couldn't be considered large, but many different plants were growing within it, while there were just too many colors to count as they gazed across it. There were so many beautiful flowers, and each was prettier than the last, bearing all sorts of fruits. Many plants shone with varying degrees of light, and one could tell even with the naked eye that these plants were exotic and extraordinary. The most astonishing thing was the lake in the middle of these plants. The lake was clearly separated into two parts. One side was icy blue in color and it exuded a faint white air, while the other side was fiery red, and the light above this side was slightly distorted. One part was blue and the other was red, and these two parts were like colossal jewels engraved into the ground. The waters evaporating from this lake permeated the dense life energy from the lake all over the valley. Ever since Hu Yuhao became a soul master, he had to absorb the vital energy of heaven and earth whenever he had to train using his mysterious heaven technique. However, he had never encountered a place with vital energy as strong as the paradise that he was in right now. Not even Clear Sky Peak could compare to this place. Hu Yuhao had only felt this overwhelming vital energy from the frigid jade essence bed that was now broken. However, the frigid jade essence bed had only contained pure cold and iciness, while this mystical world that they were in contained almost every single element, and also vast amounts of life energy. Their eyes grew slack from their awe and astonishment. Everything before their eyes was just too enchanting and pristine. This is a paradise. Wang Chua's voice was trembling. Her body shone with faint golden mist, as if was she responding to and reciprocating with the thick life energy within this valley. I am certain that there is nowhere else on the Doluo continent that is as suitable for plant growth as this place is. The life energy in this place is at least 5 times that of the Great Star Do Forest's core region. How can there be such a place on the continent? It's possible that someone is protecting this place, too. Do you know what flower that is? Hu Yuhao asked Wang Chua. Wang Chua shook her head and said, I can't tell. At least, I have never seen something like that inside the Great Star Do Forest. However, I have a feeling that the plants contain more energy the closer they are to the jewel-colored lake. Plants like this one, that are next to the lake and occupy such a huge territory, have probably evolved into soul beasts, and plant-type soul beasts are more formidable than animal-type soul beasts in the range that they can control. Are you sure the book is located there? What have you discovered? Hu Yuhao shook his head as he forced a smile. He had already channeled spiritual detection to the highest possible level to detect a single spot when he found this enormous flower. The light pink flower seemed to emanate a pale light mist that blocked off his spiritual power entirely, while it was obvious that the book was nowhere to be found in the open ground around it. The book would probably have been decomposed by this humid environment if it had been placed on the ground just like that. It seems like we have to go closer to investigate. Hu Yuhao lowered his voice as he spoke. Wang Chua said, let me go. Cover me. She was just about to move, but Hu Yuhao pulled her back and said, did you not say that these plants are typically afraid of heat and cold? Let me go, you cover me. Don't worry, I will be extremely careful. Wang Chua shot a glare in his direction, but she didn't dispute his words. She was confident that she wasn't inferior to Hu Yuhao in terms of fighting strength, but she knew that she wasn't as versatile as he was. Furthermore, Hu Yuhao was adept with soul tools, and he was definitely a lot better than she was at running for his life. Hu Yuhao gradually descended through the air towards that large light pink flower. He had raised his vigilance to the highest possible level. His right hand's dark golden terraclaw was extended, while the soul thruster on his chest was charged as much as it could be. He could immediately escape if something were to go wrong. Diamond crystals transformed into armor and enveloped his entire body, and his entire body began to sparkle under the brilliant lights. Hu Yuhao also released a little of his domain of perpetual ice, and maintained the area of effect at 1 meter around him while he continuously emanated extremely chilly energy. The valley's plants seemed exceptionally calm, as he drifted down through the air, and not a single plant attempted to attack him. Hu Yuhao chose to land on the edge of the empty space around that enormous flower. Hu Yuhao was just telling himself that his defenses were raised to the highest possible level, when a faint aroma suddenly wafted into his nostrils. Hu Yuhao was stunned for a moment before he felt goosebumps break out all over his body in the next moment. How could I have forgotten about that? I calculated everything, but I failed to realize that the fragrance from these plants can also be an attack. What's going on? Why am I having such sensations? Does this mean that the large flower's aroma isn't harmful or poisonous? Hu Yuhao was about to experiment further by inhaling a little bit more when the pink flower suddenly lit up. A pink layer of light with the plant at the center appeared, and it reached about 100 feet in diameter, as it encompassed all the open ground around it, and Hu Yuhao as well. Hu Yuhao began to half-squat. He didn't run away immediately, as he had to try his best to understand more and experience more about this place, or this expedition would be wasted. Furthermore, even though he wasn't yet considered a top-tier soul master, he had his twin martial souls and an ultimate martial soul, so his fighting strength was comparable to most seven-ringed soul sages. Hu Yuhao was also relatively confident in his own abilities. What surprised him was that he didn't feel very different after that pink light appeared. He took a small breath, and he felt as if the aroma was becoming denser. The sensations he felt in his body were even better than before, and that smooth and comforting feeling made him feel better at controlling and manipulating his soul power. Hu Yuhao was a spiritual type soul master, and he could immediately tell that the aroma had a rejuvenating effect. The aroma was energizing, and made him feel exceptionally comfortable at the same time, to the point where he felt at peace, and his state of mind was lifted to an unprecedented level. The Snow Lady was even more flexible with her control of ultimate ice, and she didn't need to consume too much of Hu Yuhao's soul power. The Snow Lady raised her little finger under Hu Yuhao's direction, and an icy blue streak of light fired towards one of the enormous flower's petals. The streak of light struck the flower petal, and it was immediately converted into a circle of icy blue light that expanded outward. Ultimate ice wasn't a joke, and this temperature, that was more than 100 degrees below zero, was absolutely fatal for plants. The enormous pink flower quivered, and its purple stamen rippled as a pink light immediately rippled from its body. This light was a lot denser than the dome around them, and Hu Yuhao could feel a sense of majesty in all this. The giant pink flower shook faintly in the next moment, and the chilly energy carried by the Snow Lady's attack vanished. A fiery red streak fired out from behind it. However, it wasn't going for Hu Yuhao and the Snow Lady. Instead, it transformed into a fiery red flower that was similar in structure to the original flower, but was 1/10 the size. How strange. This was the first time that Hu Yuhao had seen anything like this, and it was truly miraculous. There was no question that this enormous pink flower was a plant-type soul beast, but the surprising thing was that its offensive capabilities weren't that strong. The fiery red light didn't come from its own body, it came from the red part of the jewel-colored lake behind it. At this moment, Hu Yuhao began to feel as if something wasn't right. Even though he had the Ice Empress armor protecting him, the air around him had become exceedingly dense, while the temperature changes were very intense. He was located at the intersection between the lake's two parts, and this feeling was most obvious in this region. The blue lake water was cold, while the red lake water was a lot warmer. These two bodies seemed to be in conflict, but there was nothing one side could do to the other. This time, the fiery red flower that was levitating in front of the enormous pink flower began to move. It rotated in the air and absorbed the icy blue beam. The beam disappeared, while the fiery red flower merely dimmed a little. The Snow Lady's attack wasn't that powerful, but it was still ultimate ice. It was absorbed and dispelled so easily, so it wasn't difficult to imagine what the red water's temperature was like. It had to be a temperature produced by ultimate fire. The large pink flower seemed to have been infuriated at this moment, and every single petal began to tremble before they started to sway rhythmically, and they shifted as if they were lifting something upwards. Hu Yuhao's mouth hung slack as he looked on in fright. Flower after flower that resembled the one that had just appeared were created from the red lake water and positioned behind this huge pink flower. There were thousands of them, and they congregated behind the large pink flower in throngs and masses. This fellow can actually control the strange lake water. Hu Yuhao hadn't imagined he would end up facing off against so many entities that originated from ultimate fire, and he was almost ready to tuck tail and run without any hesitation at all. However, an amicable female voice could be heard right at this moment. "Human, it's your good fortune that you can make it here, but I will no longer show you mercy if you continue to provoke me." Hu Yuhao's charged soul thrusters were prepared to erupt before he suddenly stopped everything. He stared at the giant pink flower before him with slack eyes and his jaw half open as he mumbled, You can talk." Hu Yuhao had encountered soul beasts who could talk before, but it was the first time he had seen plants who could talk. Wang Chua came up beside Hu Yuhao with a flash of golden light and grabbed his hand. Her face was full of anxiety as she muttered, "That's 100,000-year plant-type soul beast. Prepare to run." No matter how much confidence Hu Yuhao and Wang Chua had in their abilities, they would never consider themselves strong enough to fight a 100,000-year soul beast. A 100,000-year soul beast was comparable to a powerful title Doluor, and certain especially formidable 100,000-year soul beasts could challenge a transcendent Doluor. They had actually run into an unassailable problem. "I'm not a 100,000-year soul beast." The giant pink flower's petals began to open and close, and her voice was just so friendly and warm that the two of them felt extremely comfortable listening to her. "Yes, you have an aura similar to the ice well, no wonder you could break through the jade phosphorus flowers outside to reach this place." The large flower muttered under her breath, and there seemed to be a hint of excitement in her voice. Hu Yuhao and Wang Chua's soul power was completely interjoined. They glanced at each other, and they could see the astonishment in each other's eyes. This flower was clearly a 100,000-year soul beast, yet she claimed that she wasn't. Furthermore, her voice sounded warm and amicable, and it didn't seem like she harbored any intention of attacking them. Hu Yuhao was extremely intelligent, and immediately tried to probe the flower. "Greetings, Senior. We found our way here by accident, and we don't know where this place is. We didn't want to provoke or offend you, and I hope that you can forgive us." "Oh, so that's what happened. It's nothing much, I can forgive you." It was easy to talk to this giant pink flower, and the fiery red flowers that were floating in the sky returned to the red side of the lake and disappeared as she spoke. The pressure that Hu Yuhao and Wang Chua had faced before vanished in an instant. Hu Yuhao didn't lower his guard even though it was easy to talk to this large pink flower. He asked once more, "Senior, I don't know where we are. Since you can speak the human language, why do you say that you're not a 100,000-year soul beast?" The large pink flower replied, "This place is called the Icefire Yin-Yang Well. That person says that this place is one of the world's 3 great cornucopias. Since the two of you are here by accident, then please leave as quickly as you can. You are lucky to have met me. If you had run into the other short-tempered fellows, they would probably have killed you on the spot as fertilizer. However, I haven't seen humans for a long time, and I'm very happy to see you guys here today. Quick, talk to me, and I might even consider giving you some benefits." The corner of Hu Yuhao's mouth twitched, because he realized to his surprise that this amiable enormous pink flower actually liked to nag. "All right. Let me accompany you in conversation, then. The empty space around you should be considered safe, right?" "I haven't asked yet, Senior, what is your name?" The large flower tilted as if it were a human head that was deep in thought. "That person says that I'm a medicinal herb, and he calls me the delicate silk immortal. You can call me Yu. Yes, that name sounds good. Does it sound good?" "Yes, it sounds really good." Hu Yuhao hurriedly followed the large flower's conversation. He was thinking about something else. This flower was known as the delicate silk immortal, so she should also be a medicinal herb. An immortal herb, and a herb that had already evolved into a plant-type soul beast. "You haven't told me yet, Senior. Why do you say that you're not a 100,000-year soul beast?" Hu Yuhao immediately fired off another question. The delicate silk immortal giggled and said, "That's because I haven't lived to 100,000 years of age. I'm only 10,000 years old. Actually, I'm a little more than 10,000 years old, but I can't really remember anymore." Wang Chua beside Hu Yuhao blurted out, "That's impossible. How can you be only 10,000 years old? If you're just 10,000 years old, it'd be impossible for you to have enough consciousness and intelligence to evolve into a plant-type soul beast. Furthermore, you can already speak." Thoughts spun in Hu Yuhao's head, and he quickly came to a decision. He bowed respectfully towards the delicate silk immortal and said, "I'm sorry, Yu, I've lied to you, and I am now apologizing to you. The truth is that we didn't come here by accident, and we're here for a purpose. Someone wants me to come here to find a book. Have you seen this book?" The delicate silk immortal's enormous flower suddenly began to sway vigorously from side to side. Ah. So you have been sent by that person. It's actually him. How is he? I haven't seen him for so long, and he doesn't often come back to see everyone. TSK. Truthfully, Hu Yuhao didn't know who he was referring to. Was it referring to Wang Dong's father or Niu Qian? He should be all right. Is that book really with you? Hu Yuhao continued to probe. Yes. It is. The purple stamen in the flower's center began to sway rhythmically, and an ancient book that was crafted from some unknown material drifted into view. Hu Yuhao was elated. Every single one of Uncle Niu Qian's words have turned out to be true. I just didn't expect this book to be protected by a 100,000-year plant-type soul beast. That's incredible. Is the clear sky sect actually that powerful? Hui Yuhao still didn't know what other plants there were inside this place, but he was absolutely certain that this valley was filled with exotic entities and resources. Any plant here grew 10 times faster than they normally would. What kind of principle was that? Can you give it to me, Yu? Thank you. Hui Yuhao began to feel excited as he realized that he could possibly retrieve the medicinal herb that could save Wang Donger's life. No can do. I've been protecting it for 10,000 years, so how can I give it to you so easily? Yu's answer made it sound as if she couldn't bear to part with that book. 10,000 years. Hui Yuhao was stunned on the spot. He suddenly realized that the person that had left this book behind, the person that Yu was speaking of, wasn't Niu Qian, and neither was it Donger's father. Who could that be? 10,000 years. He left this book here for 10,000 years. That's almost impossible to believe. Yes. It's been 10,000 years. That person said that this book can only be given to his descendant, or to someone with the right destiny. Furthermore, his descendants have to undergo a test before they can claim this book. You have to do 2 things if you want this book. You have to prove that you're his descendant, and then you have to pass the test. Only then can you take it. Hui Yuhao asked confusedly, how can I prove that? The delicate silk immortal's voice became a little solemn as she said, it's quite dangerous if you want to prove yourself. If you are unsuccessful, then you might die. That's the rule he left behind. He said that this place is almost like heaven on earth, and we can never let evil humans know about this place. Those that are pretending to be his descendants will have to die. I will definitely not kill you, but it's hard to say the same about the other guys. Are you sure you want to prove that you're his descendant? Hui Yuhao turned around to her, and his eyes were full of complicated emotions. It's likely that I will succeed, Chioa. Even though I don't know what this thing about descendants is about, and I don't know who the person who left this book behind 10,000 years ago was, I know that obtaining this book is the only way I can find the medicinal herb to save Donger's life. Uncle Niu Qian directed me here, and I trust that he won't harm me. He must think that I'm a descendant of the person that left this book behind, and so he has assigned this task to me. Therefore, I am 50% certain that I will be fine. No. Absolutely not. Wang Chio's words were decisive. 50%. The other 50% will cost you your life, don't you know that? Do you think it's worth it for you to die just like that? I can tell you that every single plant in this place is sophisticated, and I have studied plant-type soul beasts before. However, I do not recognize more than 2/3 of the plants in this place. Your chances of survival don't even stand at 50%. I don't even think you have a 30% chance to survive. If you die, Wang Chioa suddenly realized that Hui Yuhao didn't seem to be listening to her. His eyes seemed a little vacant, and he was looking up diagonally into the sky, as if he were thinking about something. Yes, Hui Yuhao was thinking, and he was thinking about Wang Donger. The Wang Dong that he knew surfaced continuously in his mind, to the point when Wang Dong became Wang Donger. Wang Dong was his arrogant dorm mate, and then became his best buddy. They cultivated together, studied together, and teacher Jui scolded them when they were late together. They fought side by side in the Continental Advanced Soul Master Academy Soul Dueling Tournament, and they fought with everything they had to defend Shrek's honor and glory. At the Sea God's fate on Sea God's Lake, the raiment of light had been heavily imprinted in the deepest parts of his heart. The truth was that he had felt that something wasn't right with Wang Dong a long time ago, and had wanted to test her gender when they met again. However, he didn't have to investigate anything, and she revealed her gender to him during the Sea God's fate. Mutual feelings, love at first sight, love at second sight, destined in 3 lives, eternal love. Hui Yuhao couldn't forget about everything that had happened that day, and how beautiful she was. She's the clear sky sect's little princess, but she still chose me without any regrets or complaints. He could never forget the nights that he had shared with her, every night when they stayed together beneath the same roof, the same window, and every night when they cultivated together. Hui Yuhao was absolutely certain that Wang Donger would give everything she had for him, too. He could feel the love she had for him. She had become a lot gentler than before, and her love for him drove this personality change. Everything fell into his eyes. He could clearly remember that Wang Donger had shyly told him, when she gave him the pouch, that her first uncle had told her she could only give the pouch to him when she was completely sure that he was the one. This meant she was giving her entire life to him. Donger, tears trickled down Hui Yuhao's cheeks. His eyes were full of the memories he had of her. I miss you so much, Donger. Wang Chioa looked identical to Wang Donger, and she was standing right next to him. However, he felt as if Donger was so far away from him, as if she were on the other side of the world. He really wanted to take her into his embrace at this moment. Wang Chioa was stunned as she watched Hui Yuhao's tears roll down his face. This wasn't the first time she had seen him cry, but for some reason, she felt her heart grow cold this time. It's obvious that his tears aren't flowing for me. Is he thinking about her? Is she really that good? But we look exactly the same. Why? Why is this happening? Hu Yuhao suppressed his emotions and wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes as he softly pulled away Wang Qiu's arm that was holding onto his own. You're right, my chances of survival aren't great. Hu Yuhao began to speak, his expression once again calm and composed. Wang Qiu was delighted. She was about to say something before Hu Yuhao turned towards the delicate silk immortal and said, Yu, will I be able to leave this place in peace if I decide not to try? Yu said, yes. As long as you don't touch anything else in this place, and you're not afraid of the intense poisons outside, then you can leave as and when you want to. There was no question that she had a lot of self-confidence in her speech. It was still hard to say exactly how many hidden dangers there were inside this valley. At the very least, Yu was confident enough that she wasn't afraid of Hu Yuhao bringing outsiders into the place. Perhaps there were more 100,000-year plant-type soul beasts in this place than everywhere else on the continent combined. Hu Yuhao nodded and told her, thank you. He turned around and stared at Wang Qiu. Wang Qiu returned his gaze with a complicated expression in her eyes and said, let's go. All right. Hu Yuhao nodded his head gently, but his eyes were still welling up with tears. Wang Qiu took the initiative to grab his hand. Even though the delicate silk immortal had said she wouldn't stop them from leaving, there were still many other dangers in this place, and it was still a lot safer for them to maintain their martial soul fusion. However, just when Wang Qiu began to infuse her soul power into Hu Yuhao, she realized that her soul power didn't connect with his. Wang Qiu glanced at him in surprise. Hu Yuhao's wrist suddenly flipped around at this moment, and he used the Tang San's arresting technique to accurately pinch Wang Qiu's carpal vein as he injected soul power into her. Wang Qiu immediately felt as if half her body had become extremely numb. Hu Yuhao then raised his right palm and sliced down onto her neck. Wang Qiu's pretty eyes were fixed on Hu Yuhao with a look of incredulity, but her body still crumpled downwards like a rag doll. Not in her wildest dreams did she expect Hu Yuhao to attack her. Hu Yuhao pulled gently and supported her waist with his right hand as he carefully placed her flat on the ground. Hu Yuhao was very apologetic as he said, I'm sorry, Qiu. I know you won't let me make this choice if I don't do this to you. Yes, you're right, it's very likely that I will fail this test. However, if I don't even have the courage to try it, I will be letting Donga down. His expression became extremely relaxed when he uttered the last few words. Hu Yuhao gazed into the horizon and said, we are bound to do crazy things from time to time in our lives. Donga, my only hope is that I can see you again. Phew, you're such an idiot. Skydream's voice rang out in Hu Yuhao's mind. Hu Yuhao was momentarily stunned, and he frowned faintly as he replied, are you going to stop me too, brother Skydream? Skydream said plainly, that's enough, you don't have to say anything more. Just do it. Why would I stop you? If the Ice Empress were the one that was injured, I wouldn't cower away, either. Furthermore, you're underestimating how strong your body is. Don't forget that your body has absorbed life gold before, and you possess ultimate ice as well. You went through so much suffering when you fused with the Ice Empress back then, and the circumstances were so difficult, but you did it anyway. Your willpower is far superior to that of the average person, and I don't believe you will die just from eating some herb. Hu Yuhao said, what if it's poison? Hu Yuhao's eyes grew a little slack. Why didn't you tell me that earlier? If I could have explained that to her, then I wouldn't have had to knock her unconscious. When she wakes up, Skydream's tone was a little arrogant as he said, I just woke up. All right, you win. He had been so sure he was going to die, but that negative thought was immediately converted into absolute confidence after he listened to Skydream's consolations. Yes. How can an herb kill me? I don't believe that. Hu Yuhao's thoughts stopped here as he stepped before the delicate silk immortal. He lowered his voice and said, please give me that herb. I am willing to undergo this assessment. Hee. That's great. You're so courageous. Let me think, what should I give you? The delicate silk immortal was clearly quite ecstatic, and her enormous pink blossom was tossing from side to side. Hu Yuhao immediately became despondent. What's happening? Has she not decided upon the herb way before this? Why is she making an impromptu decision? This delicate silk immortal is so eccentric. The delicate silk immortal seemed to detect the changes in his emotions. She spoke with a scolding voice, don't worry. I've been alive for far too long, so it's normal that my memory isn't fantastic. Let me take a look at you. A purple beam of light floated out from her stamen as she spoke and landed on Hu Yuhao. Hu Yuhao maintained his vigilance, but the delicate silk immortal's ability arrived with no warning, and he couldn't detect anything with his spiritual detection, either. This meant the delicate silk immortal was stronger than he was in every possible way, and if he wanted to stop it, he could only meet force with force, because he had no chance of avoiding it. Fortunately, the purple beam didn't contain any hostility at all. The delicate silk immortal withdrew it after a while and muttered to herself, "So, that's the case. Let me give you this." Another purple beam shot out from her stamen as she spoke. This purple beam fired into the distance, and reached 100 meters across the valley before it landed in a patch of vegetation. The purple beam paused momentarily before it was withdrawn. Hu Yuhao had powerful eyes, and he could instantly tell that there was a single plant at the other end of it now. This herb was entirely unassuming, and its entire body was bluish-green. What was strange was that the plant had 3 snow-white leaves in the center, and there were several drops of water in the middle of these leaves, as if they were the remnants of the morning's dew. Hu Yuhao knew nothing about this herb. He had no idea what it was, and the herb was quickly brought before him under the delicate silk immortal's guidance. The delicate silk immortal said, "Yes, that must be it. I knew nobody would attempt to go through all those poison clouds for no reason at all. Lift your head and open your mouth." Hu Yuhao took a deep breath. It was impossible for him not to be hesitant about something that concerned his life or death. However, the thought that Dong could collapse in front of him and there would be nothing he could do about it flashed across his mind, and whatever hesitation he had before vanished into thin air. He gradually raised his head and opened his mouth, his eyes even more determined now. The delicate silk immortal controlled the herb, and slowly brought it before Hu Yuhao. She tilted the plant, and the transparent dewdrop-like water droplets on its leaves immediately flowed into Hu Yuhao's mouth. Hu Yuhao felt a sweet taste flow down his throat, and a crisp aroma that refreshed his heart and mind immediately filled every corner of his body. Is this poisonous? Why does it taste so good? Hu Yuhao was still thinking to himself, when he realized to his surprise that the herb was rapidly wilting away after the dewdrop-like liquid flowed into his mouth. The plant became a pile of dust in no time, and all it left behind were a few seed-like pods. Part 1 end here.